Over to you, Reverend Fox. Thank you.
It's great to be here with all of you. And given that this is Indigenous Peoples Day, a good way to start talking about green cemeteries is really looking at how ancient peoples cared for their departed loved ones. How did they handle their dead? And some would do what's known today as natural burial or green burial. And sometimes it would be taking the body of the dead and putting it in a fetal position and burying it. And we know that there are different practices with different tribes. But one of the things about returning the body to earth, it's something that really reflects a nature religion or nature tradition cycle. So when we look at green cemeteries today, we're really looking at people who are keeping alive a really ancient practice of returning human remains. It can be full body burial, or it can be cremated remains returned. On some people do a sky burial, but a way of returning the human remains to the earth. And with green cemeteries, you're intentionally preserving green space. Long ago, there really wasn't a need to intentionally preserve green space in the way that we need to do it now. There was a much smaller number of people. And I think there was more of a respect for the interconnectedness of all life. That said, not all ancient peoples really did right by the environment, so we can learn some lessons. Easter Island, or what some people called it, that's what the people from Europe called it, or Rapa Nui is the name from the ancient peoples, used to have forests, but by the time the Europeans came, the forests were gone. So a lot of different changes. So one of the things that I hope we can incorporate in our world today is more of an awareness of ancient practices, and also a real commitment to green the end of life, just as we're trying to live sustainably. Many people are really choosing natural burial, some form of green cemetery as part of their end of life planning. And when you think about it, if you are really endeavoring to live healthily and take in whole foods and really do right as you are alive, well, why should your body get filled with toxic chemicals um, if you are um, going to be disposed of after death? How is that helpful? And many people think that this is required, but what they don't understand is natural burial's been going on much longer. I mean, we're talking thousands and thousands of years with humans than the present embalmed bodies. So why do we have cemeteries, so many cemeteries which require bodies to be embalmed and have those bodies put in some type of metal casket inside a concrete vault or fiberglass vault? Why are we trying to preserve the human remains and keep them from returning to the earth? Well, a lot of this really came in America as a result of the Civil War. There was such massive die-off, and they wanted to preserve bodies to get them back to their loved ones. And then when Lincoln was assassinated and his body was on a train that went across the country, a lot of people realized this embalming thing became trendy at that point, to the point that now many people don't fully understand there's choices. So much of what happens with your body if you're picking a cemetery really is a result of what the cemetery requires. So some cemeteries require certain things. They want the liner in the grave to make maintenance easier. Well, with a green cemetery, you are returning the body to the earth, you're mounding the dirt up over it. We often have people also place flowers on top of it after we've done a natural burial. And then over time, it sinks down. So there is a certain amount of tending to the graves with a green cemetery, but it's in an all natural environment. Circle Cemetery, which Circle Sanctuary has is part of its 200-acre nature preserve near Barneveld, Wisconsin. I live on land right next to Circle Sanctuary Nature Preserve. We began our land project back in 1983, and then in 1995, we began the cemetery project. We waited until we actually had paid off the land before we started doing our cemetery. We knew we were going to be blazing some trails and wanted to make sure we did right by the dead. So in 1995, we began our cemetery and became one of the first in not only the US, but North America to have a green cemetery. We know about the ancient cemeteries that I talked about earlier as part of the history, but today there really is a need to intentionally conserve green space, and that's why green cemeteries really are a great option for people. And more green cemeteries are happening now, and I see more green cemeteries happening not as competition but as a success, because as we find good ways to preserve green space and at the same time remember our loved ones, I mean, what a wonderful combination. So we have 20 acres out of Circle Sanctuary's 200 acres. That's our green cemetery. When we started back in 1995, it was much less. It was about an acre along a ridge top. But in order to do full body burials, we needed to go through some governmental processes, and that took a bit, but we made it through the hoop, and so that was really good. So we became the first green cemetery to go through the hoops in Wisconsin. So we complement some of those older historic cemeteries where there also were human remains not embalmed that were returned to the earth. But with us, we not only keep the green space from being developed, but we're engaged in ecological restoration. Our cemetery has 4 parts. We have a restored prairie, and we scatter cremains there. We have the burying ground, which is a wooded area, and it was a field many, many years ago, back when it was in agricultural hands. So we have a forest, an oak forest, that's the burying ground. And then we have the original ridgetop where we started our cemetery. And we don't do full body burials up there because it's rocky, but we can typically get down enough to be able to put in ashes in the ground. The 4th part of the cemetery is our stone circle, and it's a place for doing all sorts of ceremonies, and we have sometimes done ceremonies there before we go to the graveside for a gravesite ceremony. So that's a kind of an overview of green cemeteries in general, and also what we're doing at Circle Sanctuary. I would say there's now more than 200 green cemeteries in the US. There are some online directories that get updated from time to time. And if you're looking to find a green cemetery that's going to meet your needs, some things to find out is what the requirements are for getting buried there? Can you do pre-arrangements? And can you have a marker on your grave? We're one of the few green cemeteries that actually permits non-indigenous stone to mark graves. Well, I think more people are going to embrace stones and other more permanent places to designate grave sites because paganism of many paths really honors ancestors, and you want to honor those ancestors by knowing a place that's connected with them. We use granite markers. And part of that comes from the fact that we helped get the pinnacle on the list of emblems that can go on veteran gravestones. And as a result of that, we started getting granite markers. And now we have granite markers from a local family owned stone monument company that we have used for people that are civilians. So we like to mark the graves. In fact, at our Samhain coming up, we're going to have the first day of our festival. It's going to be up at Circle Cemetery. And there'll be a workshop. We'll have a chance to go 10 graves. We'll have a chance to do ritual. So I am so glad to be here with all of you. I left a few minutes in case there are questions. Anything you want to know?
Well, I'm curious. I believe I want to double check if I'm correct. I believe one of the nice things about, what you're doing with with the green cemeteries is that I believe in most states by law, they cannot be developed. That once something is created a cemetery, I believe that that has some really nice legal protections. Do you know if that is correct?
Well, it varies state by state. And I know in Wisconsin, some of the old pioneer cemeteries and Native American burial grounds were not given the kind of attention and respect that they needed to. And then there was an attempt, in addition to burial mounds or effigy mounds, there's a variety of different kinds of indigenous sites. And there were several mounds on a piece of property, a quarry um, operator had lots of land to get stone from, but one particular property, there was something like 3 acres where there's some ancient Native American mounds, and he tried to get the Wisconsin legislature to pass laws to make it possible for him to blow up the mounds, which that kind of stuff is still going on, unfortunately. The good news is that instead of taking down the law that was protecting the native sites, it got strengthened, but it was a multiple year process. So uh, one of the things about green cemeteries, many people are inquiring about them now, so more are starting up. There are some parts of the funeral industry that are threatened by this and have actually tried to pass some laws to prevent it. I think part of the reason we were successful in being in good relation with funeral homes here is I actually had a history with doing green funerals using nature imagery at funerals, at funeral homes and other places. So they were already used to me. And then when we had our green cemetery and started doing full body burials, then um, they actually saw this as a business opportunity rather than as a threat. And now many of the funeral homes do offer a green option here in Wisconsin, which I think is a really positive thing. I know some green cemeteries do not really want to have cremains at their cemetery, but for us, it's about choice. And cremation is something a number of people over time around the world have used. And while, yes, it's releasing It's a bigger carbon footprint in a way. Some people actually prefer cremation because it allows their ashes to be scattered in multiple places, or it's not taking up any ground, period. So that's an eco argument that I've heard used. So at our cemetery, there's the burying ground, the restored prairie where ashes can be scattered, and then there's the original ridge top where ashes are buried, as well as our stone circle.
And then we have a quick question in that was typed in. Reverend D writes, I like the idea of green cemeteries so people know where you're buried, but is it possible in heavily populated areas? So I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
I know that people are looking at having green cemeteries in all sorts of areas. One of the things that one needs to keep in mind if one is going to create a green cemetery is really look at the existing, in the US, the existing state laws, then you have to look at the county laws, then you have to look at the local laws. Now, the irony is we started a national pagan cemetery in one of the first green cemeteries in North America and managed to get it through a fairly conservative county board. Dane County, we're in Iowa County, Dane County, right next door, there was an affluent doctor and his family that had a social justice center, and they were trying to get their green cemetery started. But some of the neighbors, it was more densely populated, considered it a threat to their land value and started doing opposition. So when they got through the zoning hoop to do a cemetery, they had all sorts of conditions with their cemetery that we didn't have. So much of it depends on the politics. It shouldn't be that way, but it's really important that we have this choice for people in many locations. And I'm really hoping that there can be some closer to more populated areas. Some people come to our green cemetery because it's rural and they really like to be able to be out in a place and just see nature all around and not have traffic noises and all of that, to totally forest bathe or be immersed. Other people want to have 24/7 access and they want it in a more urban area. So I see our work with green cemeteries as something that complements the different choices there are. And we aren't really looking to have a huge influx of lots of burials at this stage anyway. It's um, pretty much people decide and usually come out and take a look at our green cemetery. I think part of it, our work with ecological restoration, we just don't um, preserve land from development. We actually are actively trying to have the land be restored in a good way. Many people have chosen our cemetery for that reason. So lots of different choices out there.
I
Nan.
just kind of wanted to say something about the cemetery in a populated area. And maybe I'm kind of different from most human beings, but spend at least an hour every day out in the cemetery walking my dog. I love cemeteries. And so I think that the population just needs to be educated on how actually I think a cemetery that's a nice green space can actually improve your property values. And I think that it's just an education thing that people are like maybe afraid or whatever. But like, as my friend in the police department says, it's not the dead people that you need to worry about. And so, and so I think that cemeteries are great neighbors. And I think that if people were educated, it actually increases your property value. So I just kind of wanted to say that as a thumbs up for cemeteries in more urban areas. Just in
Well, we
general.
found out
Yeah.
that good point, and we found out about that because the opposition actually called us trying to get things that they could use against this other green cemetery, and of course we didn't give them anything that would be a harmful thing. And They didn't know that our attorney was working with their attorney to try to give support. Yeah, and I actually see the argument about green space helping property value is a really important one, and I'm really hoping more people will embrace that going forward and really see how important that is. And I think more people are understanding immersion in nature really helps with stress. And I see that green cemeteries are great for the living as well as the dead.
I wanted to chime in real quick, Nan, and oh, and Selena, great to hear you again. You're always awesome. I think that part of the opposition is the fact that in our society, we have a pathological relationship with the idea of death. People simply do not understand that from a naturalistic and even nature-based standpoint. And this group and all pagan groups and all earth-based culture building groups, we are making serious progress in getting people to see that death is a natural, healthy, and good part of the natural world. And I think that's going to help get us past that.
Well,
Well,
that is
Well said.
And what happened at the turn of the last century? Because Europe was all big on cemeteries being parks. I mean, it was a huge movement. And then, like, I don't know what happened, but like the cemetery where I walk my dog, it was done like in the late 1800s by a famous landscape architect, and it has a huge old catalpa trees, like huge old trees that you're not going to find anywhere else. And it's just, I don't know what happened to that movement because it was really big at the end of the 1880s or 1890s. And then anyways, giving a thumbs up to it because I think it's awesome.
Well, with that, we're going to have to say good night. I want to thank everybody for spending this half an hour, and I want to invite you all back. We're here every month. We always have, sometimes we talk among ourselves, and sometimes we have amazing speakers. So thank you all and have a wonderful October.
Thank
Many
you all so
blessings.
much.
Thank you.